There is a question that, sooner or later, everyone has thought about, even if only once, even if they've never dared to say it out loud. When we die, will we still recognize each other? Will a father who once loved his child unconditionally still remember the afternoons they walked hand in hand to school? If he has crossed over to the other side, will a mother who once stayed awake all night for her feverish child still watch over every turn that child takes in this world? Will a husband no longer bound to this body still recognize the eyes of the wife who sat beside him through all those stormy seasons? We don't ask these questions when we're young because we assume we'll live forever, because we assume the people beside us will live forever too. But then death comes, quiet, sudden, and impossible to refuse. And in that moment, the question we once thought too distant suddenly becomes the one we long to know most. I didn't create this video to tell you what to believe. I don't have scientific proof. I only have this: honesty with myself, and a sincere effort to listen to what philosophers, mystics, and those who have brushed close to death have shared. This won't be an easy video to watch, because it will take you into the darker corners of the mind, where doubts live, where fear resides, where nothing is certain. But if you're brave enough to stay until the very end, you might just find something for yourself. Not a definite answer, but a deeper stillness, a shift in how you see, an understanding that maybe what we once called family hasn't truly been lost. We grew up in a physical world where everything must be seen, measured, explained. But perhaps the world after death isn't like that. When someone we love leaves this life, we often hear people say, "They've gone far away now. They've returned to dust." But then, late at night, we feel something, someone, watching, present. It's not a hallucination. It's not superstition. It's something real, even if it has no words. So what is that? Could it be that the soul really does survive the body? Could it be that between souls who were deeply connected in life, there remains a thread, invisible, unbreakable, that not even death, time, or distance can sever? This question isn't new, but it has never stopped haunting the human heart. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you accept death as part of nature, you begin to see all things from a different perspective." And that is exactly the space this video hopes to invite you into. Not to fear death, not to cling, but to understand deeply what remains and what fades when death finally knocks on the door. Why is this important? Because so many of us are alive, but not truly living. We go through life carrying the grief of someone we've lost, but we don't know what to do with it. We smile at the world, but cry quietly in the dark, asking, "Does Mom still remember me? Does my child still feel my presence? My wife, she passed 3 years ago. Can she still hear me when I whisper her name?" These questions, they're not found in textbooks. They're not taught in school, and no cold data can answer them. Yet they shape the way we live, the way we love, the way we move through grief, and decide whether we keep going or stop. Someone once told me, "I'm afraid that when I die, I won't be myself anymore. I won't remember who my wife was, who my mother was, who my child was. I'm afraid I'll become just something, floating in the void. No feelings, no memories." That made me pause, because it exposed the quietest fear that many who've lost someone carry but never say. The fear of being forgotten, the fear that our loved ones won't just be gone from this world, but gone from memory, even in the afterlife. But if you've ever listened to near-death experiences, to those who've clinically died and come back, you'll know they don't describe coldness, they don't describe emptiness, they don't describe forgetting. On the contrary, Most of them speak of feeling more alive, more awake, more loving, more connected. They weren't just bodies anymore. They were a kind of pure awareness, one that didn't need to see or speak, to remember, to love, to recognize. Of course, we shouldn't blindly believe everything. Some experiences might come from the brain. Some might be the result of longing or imagination. But are all of them illusions? Is love, the force that binds us to our family, our soulmates, our children, really so fragile that it disappears the moment breath stops? Or is love greater than death? In the next part, we'll step deeper into this question. Does the soul continue after death? And if so, can it still remember the ones it loved the most? Don't rush to believe. Don't rush to reject. Just keep your heart open to listen, because maybe somewhere inside you already knows a truth that the mind cannot explain. We'll walk that path. If you're still here, let's set aside theological debates for a moment. No discussions of heaven, the afterlife, or reincarnation. Just you, as a human being, who has once lost someone you loved deeply. Then you'll understand why the question of whether the soul exists after death isn't just an intellectual game. It's a matter of the heart, a longing that won't let go. Marcus Aurelius, the reserved Stoic emperor, once wrote, "Death should not frighten us. It is simply the breaking apart of the elements that made us. And if the soul still exists, it goes on. If it no longer exists, then there's nothing to fear." At first glance, it sounds like Marcus was denying the soul's existence. But read carefully. He wasn't denying anything. He simply said, if the soul no longer exists, then we won't feel it. We won't know. We won't suffer. But if the soul does exist, then it continues its journey. And that very possibility opens a new space within. Stoic thought. Instead of fearing death, we are invited to live as if our soul truly exists and will continue on, even after this body is gone. But what is the soul? That's the age-old question that philosophers, scientists, and spiritual seekers have tried to answer for centuries. And yet, no final definition has been agreed upon. In Stoic philosophy, psyche, or soul, is understood as the part of us that holds reason, will, and the ability to perceive truth. Unlike some religious beliefs that see the soul as an immortal being, completely separate from the body, the Stoics saw the soul as a union between rational mind and nature itself. Seneca once said, "Death does not sever the soul from the universe. It is simply a return, like a drop of water returning to the sea." It's a beautiful image, and also a sorrowful one. Because if the soul is just a drop, and death is the dissolving into the vast ocean, then that would mean no more memory, no more individuality, no more me or my loved ones. We lose our identity. We lose our memories. We lose the ability to recognize the arms that once held us, the eyes that once wept beside us, the hands that once walked with us through life's storms. But is that really true? Or are we simply seeing all this from the narrow lens of those who are still alive? There is a great blind spot when we talk about death. We are trying to imagine what lies completely beyond our perception, like a baby in the womb. Even if it could think, it would have no way to picture the world outside. No matter how many times its mother tried to describe the sky, the light, the birds, it would only know blood and fluid and muffled echoes. We still confined to these bodies are trying to picture a state we've never experienced. And so, it's natural to feel doubt, but sometimes there are clues, small, quiet openings that let us glimpse something beyond. One of those openings comes from near-death experiences. People from all over the world, from different cultures, religions, and levels of education, have described the same thing. Moments when their hearts stopped, their brains went silent, and yet they experienced something. Some said they saw themselves leave their bodies. Some spoke of a light blinding but warm. Some described meeting loved ones who had passed and recognizing each other immediately, without words, without bodies. Not everyone believes these stories, and that's okay. No one is asking you to blindly believe, but maybe just listen to what thousands of people, from doctors, engineers, to ordinary souls, have experienced while standing at the edge between life and death. They didn't return more superstitious. They returned more awake, more kind, less afraid of dying. And the common thread in their stories, love, connection, recognition, all still existed, even when the physical body had vanished. This brings us back to the most important question, not, does the soul exist? But rather, if love between human beings is real, can death truly erase it? Have you ever loved someone so deeply that it tore you apart to lose them? Have you ever cried in the middle of the night, just whispering their name, hoping for one more dream? If so, you'll understand. Some bonds go beyond the physical, beyond logic, beyond reason. It's the kind of bond that allows a mother to feel her child in danger, even from thousands of miles away. That makes you cry when hearing the song you once listened to together. That makes someone willing to give their life for someone they love, without thinking twice. Can that really disappear when we die? Or does it follow us as a part of what the soul is made of? Stoicism teaches us to accept death as a natural part of life, but it never teaches us to be numb. On the contrary, the Stoics tell us to live each day as if it were our last, to live with full presence, with full awareness, with full connection. So, if one day we must part from those we love, that presence will help us face it with grace, not as a final goodbye, but as a transformation of the bond we shared. You don't need to believe in heaven, hell, reincarnation, or rebirth. You only need to believe this: true love cannot be destroyed, not by time, not by death, not even by forgetting. And if you still remember them, then maybe, just maybe, they still remember you. In the next part of our journey, we'll go even deeper into the question: if the soul continues on, and love remains within it, will we still recognize each other after death? Will we still hold the memories of those we once called family, or will we fade? Like smoke in the wind, we'll keep walking together. If you're still here, I want to tell you a true story, not to make you believe, but so you can listen. As someone who has lived, the man who shared this story with me is named David, a man in his 60s, a mechanical engineer by profession, rational, disciplined, not easily moved by things we'd call mystical. But then he lost his wife, the only woman he ever called home. Death came suddenly, after a stroke on an ordinary Saturday morning. No warning, no last words, just a quiet morning, with no answer when he called out, "Hey, love, your coffee's ready." 3 months after his wife's passing, David was no longer himself. He didn't cry in front of others, but every night he sat in his armchair, looking up at her framed photo on the wall, as if waiting for a conversation that was never finished. And then one night, he told me he had a strange dream, unlike any dream he'd ever had. It was vivid, it was deep, and when he woke up, tears streamed down both cheeks. Not from pain, but from gratitude. In the dream, he found himself standing in a garden. The air was unusually fresh. There was no sun, but everything glowed. And there she was, the woman he thought he'd never see again. She looked at him, said nothing, just smiled. That exact smile he knew so well. The creases at the corner of her eyes, the gentle curve of her lips. But what struck him most was her eyes. The kind of look that made him know instantly, that's my wife. There was no need for a body, no need for a voice, just her presence and a deep sense rising from somewhere beyond thought. We are still each other's. David said he didn't ask, "Are you real?" He didn't doubt. He wasn't even surprised. He just stood there, as if he'd finally made it home. Then she raised her hand, not to touch, but to place it gently on his chest, where his aching heart still beat. And she spoke, not with words, but with a clarity that rang inside his mind. "I never left you." Then the light of the garden faded, and he woke up. Some will say it was just a dream, the mind's way of comforting itself after loss, a neurological reaction, trying to heal a broken heart. And perhaps that's partly true. But you know what? David, a man who spent his whole life believing in machines, theories, and logic, completely changed how he viewed death after that night. He didn't become superstitious. He didn't claim he spoke to a spirit. But since that night, he stopped fearing death. He stopped grieving the same way. He started living again, not because the sadness disappeared, but because he felt the bond was still there. We can debate forever. Was it real? Did his wife's soul truly return? But maybe that's not the point. The point is, David was healed, not by medicine, not by advice, but by an inner experience, beyond logic. Something touched him and helped him believe again, not in the afterlife, but in the enduring meaning of love beyond death. And David is not alone. Elizabeth, a woman who lost her teenage son in a car accident at age 16, once told me this. 1 year after his death, on what would have been his birthday, she sat crying alone in the kitchen. No party, no cake, only silence so thick it was suffocating. Then suddenly, the ceiling light flickered 3 times. What's strange was, the light had been broken for a month. An electrician had checked, it found no cause. And that same light, her son used to play with it. He once joked, "If I ever become a ghost, I'll blink this light so you'll know it's me." Elizabeth said this. She didn't need anyone to believe her. She didn't need an explanation. She only knew that from that moment on, she stopped blaming God, stopped being angry at fate. And every morning, she began writing letters to her son, as if his soul was still somewhere near. You might call it coincidence, or imagination, or emotional projection. But for that mother, it was enough. Enough to keep going. Enough to live, without despair. So the real question isn't, did a soul return to give a sign? Or, is there evidence? The real question is, do you believe that the deepest connections in this life cannot be destroyed by death? Because if you do, then that belief can become a doorway. Not a door to the afterlife, but a door back to life. A life not held hostage by regret, not weighed down by grief, not clinging, not collapsing, just holding on to love, quietly. Seneca once wrote, "When someone you love dies, do not let yourself fall apart with them. Let their life become something that continues through you, and live on for the both of you." Maybe you've never had a dream like David, never seen a strange sign like Elizabeth. But if you've ever loved and ever lost, then you understand, even without a body, they're not completely gone. They've only changed form. They no longer speak with words, but they still whisper in your heart, when you're at your weakest. In the next part, we'll explore the deeper question. Does the soul still carry memory, identity, and emotion after death? If yes, what preserves those things? If not, how do we explain the sense of recognition beyond the grave? We won't rush to judgment. We'll just keep walking, with honesty and with listening. We've heard the stories, we felt the emotions. Now it's time to face the core question. If the soul truly continues after death, does it still remain itself with memory, emotion, and the ability to recognize loved ones? Or is it just a scattered stream of awareness, nameless, formless, emotionless? This is not a new question. It's one that has made some of the greatest minds in history pause, reflect, and admit the limits of their understanding. Let's begin with a simple assumption. The soul exists, not in a religious sense, but in a purely philosophical way, as a central self within us, capable of observing, feeling, and remaining present, beyond the physical body. This isn't unfamiliar to Stoicism. Epictetus once said, "You are not the body. You are the reason that uses the body, like a person uses a tool." If that's true, then death, through the Stoic lens, is simply the separation between the user and the tool. The body decays, but the observer, the soul, might still remain. But the question is, does it remember anything? Some argue, memory is a function of the brain. When the brain dies, memory dies. Therefore, after death, the soul cannot retain anything. At first, that sounds logical. But let's think deeper. If the soul were merely a byproduct of the brain, how do we explain cases of clinical death? When the brain has stopped functioning, the heart has stopped beating. Yet people come back and accurately describe what happened in the emergency room. They describe what doctors did. They recount what loved ones said. Some even mention exact details, like the color of a surgeon's socks, while their body lay motionless on the table. This happens around the world, and many who report it are doctors, professors, scientists, people not easily swayed by the irrational. So we must consider another possibility. Maybe memory doesn't reside entirely in the brain, or at the very least, some part of memory may exist in a field of awareness that transcends the physical body. The same goes for emotion. Many say, love is just a chemical reaction in the body. When the body dies, there are no hormones, no feelings left to feel or remember. This argument is rooted in physical science. But here's the paradox. Those who've had near-death or out-of-body experiences often report this instead. They felt everything, not less, but far more intensely, not just emotions, but something purer than emotion. Not sadness, but a kind of unconditional love. Not fear, but total peace and compassion. Some who've entered that state say they knew, without a doubt, who they loved most. They recognized their loved ones, not by face, not by voice, but by something deeper, a knowing that transcended the senses. It echoes a line from Marcus Aurelius. The essence of all things is not in what the eyes see or the ears hear, but in how the soul perceives them. So perhaps after death, our core self remains, but shifts into a different mode of perception. No more eyes to see, no more ears to hear, but still, it knows, it remembers, it recognizes, and if someone shared a deep bond with us, we'd still know them, not by name, not by form, but by frequency, by resonance, by the unique fingerprint of the soul that stays with us through a lifetime. Picture this. You have died. You no longer have a body, no words to speak, but someone enters the room you once lived in, and without a thought, you know exactly who they are. You don't have to recall their name. You don't have to remember their face. You simply know, with absolute certainty, this is my daughter. This is the woman I loved all my life. This is my mother, the one who once sang lullabies to me as a baby. And you don't need words. You only need to be present, and know that the connection was never broken. Science can't prove this. Religion insists on it, sometimes too rigidly, but Stoic philosophy offers something else. Truth doesn't need to be preached. It just needs to be lived. So if we live as if the soul continues, if we treat our loved ones as if this bond will outlast even death, then even without absolute answers, we're not living in vain. Because if the soul is real, we've planted seeds of love that never fade. If the soul is not, then at least we lived as fully human, capable of love, memory, and honoring what is sacred. The final question, then, isn't, after death, do I still remain myself? But rather, right now, while alive, am I living true to myself? Because if you live with deep love, with awareness, with real connection, then wherever your soul goes after this life, in whatever form, you'll still recognize those who were sacred to your heart. Because love doesn't require a body. Love is the one thing death can never touch. In the next part, we'll come back to repeat and emphasize one final message. No one truly disappears. As long as we remember them with our whole heart, we'll gather the stories, the reflections, the wisdom into one united voice. If a family is built on true love, not even death can separate it. And if you're still with me, let's keep walking forward. By now, perhaps you've come to realize something. We're not seeking answers with the mind. We're tracing something faint but deeply real within the heart. Maybe you've heard someone say, death is the end. The dead no longer know anything. How could anyone still remember each other once the body has turned to dust? And maybe you've also heard others say, they're still here. I can still feel my mother every night. I dream of my father. He never speaks, just looks at me for a long time. Between these two opposing beliefs, which one do you choose to believe? I'm not here to convince you of an afterlife. I'm only here to whisper this. There are things death cannot touch. Death may take away the body, but it cannot take away the hand that once held yours. It cannot erase the gaze shared through storms and rainy days. It cannot burn away the memories engraved on your soul, like carvings in stone. Death may prevent two people from sitting side by side, but it cannot make you forget what it felt like to be called by name. It cannot stop you from walking into the old room and sensing that everything still holds the mark of their presence, and that is the clearest proof that real love never dies. You may not believe in heaven. You may not believe in reincarnation. You may not believe in the spirit world, the soul, or any doctrine at all. But if you have ever loved deeply and lost deeply, then you know that feeling doesn't fade with time. It only moves from the outside to the inside, from sharp images to quiet sensations, from spoken words to silent presence, and it's in that silence we still recognize each other. So why fear that your loved one will forget you in the next world? Why believe that you'll remember no one once you've left this life? If love is real, it doesn't need memory to exist. It doesn't need words to express itself. It doesn't need a body to be validated. Love, when it touches the soul, becomes a kind of knowing that cannot be destroyed. You may have heard of a 3-year-old child who had never met his great-grandfather, but pointed to an old photo on an altar and said, "He used to play with me." You may have seen someone on their deathbed suddenly smile, look up to the ceiling, and whisper, "Mom's here." Stories like this are everywhere, but we often ignore them because we're too busy to believe in what can't be proven. But maybe what can't be proven is exactly what deserves our trust the most. Seneca once wrote, "How long we live matters less than how deeply we live." And in the same way, how we exist after death matters less than whether the love we lived still remains. Not everyone leaves a will. Not everyone has a tombstone. Not everyone is remembered by name. But those who lived truly and loved truly will still be here. Not in books, but in the field of connection, where the body's limits no longer apply. If you're hurting from the loss of someone you love, if you're living with the question, do they still remember me? Then let me offer you 3 truths. First, they never truly vanished. They only changed form, like steam turning into clouds, like fire becoming ash, but still part of life. Second, they don't need memory to remain within you, because they are a part of you, in the way you speak, in how you cook, in the way you sit, shaped by moments long gone. Third, if you still love them, then that connection was never broken, and if one day you, too, leave this world, it may be you who walks toward them and recognizes them first. Love, when it's pure, doesn't need light to see, doesn't need sound to hear, doesn't need memory to exist. It only needs a soul, quiet enough to feel. If you're still doubting, that's okay. If you've been angry at life, angry at God, even angry at the one who left you behind, that's okay too. Just promise me one thing. Don't close your heart, because when you close it, you don't protect yourself from pain. You only disconnect from the one thing that could truly heal you. Unconditional love, stronger than death. You don't have to understand everything. Just live as if you can still love, and love as if nothing can ever take that person away from you. That is the only way to hold on. Not by clinging, not by grasping, but by remembering, with a heart that never stops whispering their name. In the next part, we'll go even deeper. This is no longer just about you and the loved one you've lost. It's about something larger. If all souls are connected, can death truly separate us? We will not stop at answers. We will keep going into the quiet depths of awakening. And if you're still here, we'll continue together. By now, perhaps you've come to understand something. The question, will we still recognize each other after death, which once seemed so personal, actually touches something much deeper. Who am I among the infinite souls in this universe? And is there ever truly separation, or are we all just passing ripples on the surface of a unified ocean? Stoicism doesn't go as far as Eastern spiritual traditions in describing a universal soul, but Stoic philosophers, especially Marcus Aurelius, often emphasized this. We are part of the universal reason, a current within nature itself. No one is separate from anyone else. If that's true, then family is not just those tied by blood. It's anyone who has ever touched your life with love, connection, or deep empathy. And death is simply one stage. In the process of returning to that flow, we call those we've lost them. We call our own soul me. But there's a level of awareness that asks, who is me? Who is them? If you've ever sat completely still, long enough to detach from all the noise, you may have noticed something strange. There is no fixed me. There's no clear boundary between your mind and someone else's. The sorrow you carry may not be yours alone. The longing you feel may seem to come from a nameless place. A father who has lost a child can feel the grief of millions of other fathers, even without ever meeting them. A woman who has lost her husband can understand the silent tears of an old stranger sitting alone in a marketplace. Because deep down, we are not as alone as we think. If souls do exist, they are not lonely bubbles, floating in a void. They are currents, interwoven in a subtle network, beyond words or logic. And when a loved one passes, maybe they don't go anywhere at all. Maybe they simply shift into another state of being, where they no longer need to appear to be known, no longer need to speak, to be understood, no longer need to be near, to still be with us. Someone once asked me, if souls are real, why can't we see them? If they're still here, why don't they give us a clear sign? A good question, but take a moment and look around. How many precious things in life can you not see? Yet you know they're there. You can't see the wind, but you know it, by the way. It moves the leaves. You can't see love, but you feel it. In the eyes of someone waiting for you to return. You can't see a mother's care, but you grew up wrapped in that invisible warmth. So, maybe not seeing those we've lost doesn't mean they're not here. Maybe it only means we haven't yet been quiet enough to sense them in a new way. Marcus once wrote in Meditations, "You have but a short time to live. Use it to return to the eternal part of who you are." That eternal part, according to Marcus, is not a separate self, but a piece of the whole. In other words, your soul is not alone in death. It returns to something larger than itself. And in that space, every soul that once loved another may still remember each other in a way that needs no words. You may wonder, then what's the point of living if we all just dissolve into some shared current? What remains personal or meaningful if death erases everything? And I would answer, because everything fades. Every moment lived fully becomes more precious, because we will forget. Every memory held with love becomes sacred. And because death opens the door to unity, we don't need to hold on to regret, attachment, or resentment. There will come a time when you are no longer you in isolation. You will be part of the same current. Your loved one now moves within. No more separation. No one left behind. You may never have thought about this. You may feel it sounds vague, philosophical, or even religious. But if you quiet your heart, truly quiet your heart, you will notice, when you remember someone with unconditional love, when you sit still and feel the warmth of someone who has passed, when you forgive yourself and them for all the things left unsaid, something within you softens, releases. No more bitterness, no more guilt, only a breeze-light acceptance. We were never truly apart. Death is not a closing chapter, it's a turning page, where they no longer write beside us with actions, but with presence. And we, the ones who are still here, can choose how to hold them close. Not with tombstones, not with tears, but by how we live the days that follow. If they lived kindly, live kindly in their name. If they loved deeply, love someone with the depth they once gave you. If they had dreams left unfinished, let those dreams become part of your life now, because perhaps what you call missing them is really a continuation, and what you call loss is simply a return. The next part, the final part, won't be about answering any more questions. It will be a final offering, not just to those who have passed, but to you, the one who's still alive. If you've stayed with me this far, then perhaps you've already walked a little deeper into your own inner journey. Let us take the final steps together, not to gain more knowledge, but to come home to a deeper peace. You've just spent nearly 60 minutes here, not to find a definitive answer, not to be certain we'll meet again in some other realm, not to gain anything new or profound, but simply to listen to yourself. Maybe you're sitting alone in a quiet room. Maybe you're thinking of someone you can no longer call, no longer hug, no longer say, "I love you, Mom," or "I miss you too." Maybe you're still living each day with a heart that carries a wound no one can see. If so, I just want to say one thing. You are braver than you think. You didn't collapse. Even when you wanted to give up, you kept going. Even when no one asked you to, you stood back up. Even though the one who used to hold your hand is no longer here. And that, not everyone can do. The truth is, no one ever truly gets over losing someone they love. We simply learn to live with it, a little lighter each day, a little quieter with each step. And if you're still walking forward, you've already gone farther than you realize. We often think of death as separation, but if you pay close attention, death doesn't take everything. It only takes what is visible. What remains? Love, connection, memory, intuition, unspoken words. They stay, like the scent on your father's old shirt, like the cough you'd hear at night from your mother, like the gaze of someone no longer present, yet still here, in your dreams, in the way you live, in the things no one taught you, but you still somehow know. Maybe after death, we no longer recognize each other by sight, by words, or by form. But I believe, when souls have once touched through deep love, they never dissolve from one another. We don't need bodies to know who someone is. We just need a silence deep enough, a heart open enough, a trust that needs no proof. And maybe one day, in some strange moment, you'll feel a nameless presence, no bond, no voice, just a quiet warmth, as if someone is watching you from somewhere very near and very far. And you'll understand, they never really left. I don't know what awaits us after death. I don't know if we're reborn, or become light, or fall into eternal sleep. But I do believe this: if you have ever loved with all your heart, if you have ever lived sincerely, if you have ever ached from losing someone, then death cannot erase you, and it cannot erase the one you once loved. So, if you're still alive today, live as if those who have passed are watching you with their gentlest eyes. Live as if you're carrying a part of their soul within you. And if you regret, not saying sorry, not saying I love you, not once looking into their eyes and saying, "You were my whole world," it's okay. You still have a chance, not to say it to them, but to live in a way that would make them smile. If they are still watching, some losses don't need to be healed. They just need to be quietly held, like a small stone resting at the bottom of a well, never gone, never forced to disappear, just there, always, with you. And one day, you will understand. You don't need to get over the pain. You only need to reach a peace large enough to live with it. You may never have a final answer to the question, will we meet again after death? But you will have something else, deeper, stronger. The trust that real connection does not need to be proven. And if you still remember someone with a quiet heart, they are still here, not in the past, but in you, right now. You don't need to say anything more. No long explanation, no final message, no effort to make anyone understand. Because if they truly wanted to understand, they wouldn't have let you go in silence. And if they are truly still here, they will understand by how you live each day. And if, one day, you meet them again, in whatever form, in whatever realm, you won't need to ask, is it really you? You'll just know, with a clarity beyond all doubt, because when love has touched the soul, it doesn't need proof. If you've stayed with me until this very moment, I may not know who you are, but I know you have a heart, and you are seeking something you don't know how to name. I hope you find it. Not the answer, but peace. Thank you for being brave enough to stay until the end, for being gentle enough not to rush, and for being deep enough to listen to something most people overlook. If fate allows, we'll meet again, in another video, or in another lifetime, where souls recognize each other, not by name, but by a memory that never fades.